young people, so sure, I'll do a video. And then Tyler Oakley like posted one of them, and it just went viral. And now I have all these like 12 and 13-year-old kids coming to my shows. So I thought, there's something really empowering about just embracing 100% of who you are and what people have called you your whole life. And I realized that if I just embraced it and sort of celebrated, they no longer had any power over me. And and this drag queen in Peru knew that, and she crossed over, was on television. So I came back and I started writing. And then the third thing that inspired me was I had read a book about Native Americans and how in their culture they had two-spirited people, which were men who dressed as women and did all of the women's chores, and they were seen as shamans. So I decided that Coco Peru was a modern-day shaman, and that's where I took off. So I really felt I had a calling to do drag in much the same way people have a religious calling to become a nun or a priest or whatever. I really felt that drag was my calling. You know, people gluing mirrors to their faces, and I loved it. I really thought it was wonderful, but I knew that I wanted to be different. I wanted to stand out in a different way. So I just thought, I'm going to do the opposite of what all these other drag queens do, and I'm going to just like wear clothes. I'm going to wear like hardly any jewelry, and I'll just wear a really kind of boring wig. And that's how I created the look. And I wanted Coco, it's funny that like Brie Vandekamp on ended up looking like me, because that's kind of what not that I based I was long before her, but that's kind of what I had in mind, that Coco was going to be this sort of average looking, housewife kind of looking woman who has an extraordinary life. And that I didn't, and as hard as she tries to keep things perfect, something's always going wrong. And I don't pretend to be a woman in my live shows. If you've ever seen my one-person shows, I talk about being a boy who dresses as a girl and all that. So, but then when I did Girls Will Be Girls, Richard Day, who wrote and directed that, sort of saw that part of Coco and then turned it into that, you know. But that's sort of how I based Coco, that she was going to be this sort of, you could picture her shopping in, you know, the local supermarket with her little basket. There's something not quite right about that.
So when Coco appeared, what was the reaction of family and friends?
Well, my parents, I told them that I was going to do drag, and my mom's reaction was like, well, that's okay, you always had to be different. And then the year I was born, I was 3 months old, I had a sister who was 15 that passed away. So I never knew her, but I grew up feeling like I knew her because, you know, they talked about her and whatnot. But she was, if there was any sibling that I was most like, it would have been her, because she was the singer, she was the artist, she painted. And so when I finally stood in front of my parents in drag, I said, so, you know, what do you think? And they just, like, their faces fell and they looked really disturbed. And they were like, holy shit. And I was like, oh God, they hate me. And then my mother said, you look like your dead sister's ghost. And I said, oh, well, that's not exactly the look I was going for. And my parents came to my first show, and they sat right up in front with my other siblings and their husband and wife. And my mother was terrified that people were going to throw tomatoes. She really thought people were going to bring tomatoes and throw them. So she sat right up front to like stand and block it. Because
that's what moms are supposed to do. Tomatoes is high on the list of mother activities. I think that's wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, I've been fortunate with both of my parents, and my mom's now 88, and she's flying out to visit my partner and I in June, and she's horrified that she's missing this today.
Aww.
Yeah.
hope someone.
She's an attention whore, is my point. I went to an audition once for, this is a very silly story, but I went to an audition once, and the guy called me and said, do you do accents? And I said, the only accent I do is Bronx, so don't have me come in. Because it was a French accent. He said, you know what, come in anyway. So I went in, and that's when I realized that he wasn't the casting director. He was just a fan of mine that was an assistant to the casting director. And he wanted to meet me. So she comes into the room, she says, do you do a French accent? And I looked at him, and I looked at her, and I said, no. And she started screaming at me, going, what the fuck are you doing here? You better not fucking embarrass me. Get out in that hallway and learn how to do a fucking French accent. She's cursing at me, and I'm looking at this guy, and he just puts his head down and starts typing. So I go out to the hallway, and I'm trying to do a French accent. I get called into the audition, and there's all these people sitting there, and it started off like sort of French, and then it turned Jewish. And it ended up like offensive Chinese. I walked out, and if that wasn't bad enough, as I left, the guy that had invited me sees me to the top of the stairs, and I fell down the flight of stairs. And I was so mortified. He said, are you all right? And I went, I'm fine. And I just pushed the door open and walked out. I never looked back at him. But that was another drag mishap.
Did you book the role, though? Did you book the role?
Around young people, so sure, I'll do a video. And then Tyler Oakley posted one of them, and it just went viral. And now I have all these 12 and 13-year-old kids coming to my shows. I find it so inspiring, and I would never have imagined that that would happen in my lifetime. I would never marry gay married, none of this, you know. And I'm so inspired by these young kids that come to see my shows, and I just want you to know that I'm thankful for YouTube and for all that, but the main thing that really just matters to me is that these young kids get to see me walking around Kmart. And I don't care what anybody thinks of me. And I really think that those kids, and I'm not hiding, I'm walking through that store, picking things up and throwing them back and just carrying on like a fool under all that fluorescent. And I just have to say, I think those young kids are empowered by that image of someone just being out there in the world and being 100% themselves. And I'll tell you the other thing, drag really cuts through bullshit. Because when I walk into a Starbucks dressed like this, I immediately know who's on my side and who's not on my side. And I'm much more interested in those people that are on my side. And I get to meet so many terrific people. You know, a barista going, Coco, I love your makeup, or whatever. It's wonderful. Even if they don't know who I am, I find it so engaging.